Welcome back. Now we know that how to configure our properties. So next we have to work on our next layer, that is the repository layer. So if you remember the picture, we have reached until here, service. And now we have made some configuration in our application, in our Spring Boot application about the database related configuration. So we have to now create a repository file which the Spring Data JPA will use to connect to database. And we know that Spring Data JPA is built on top of Hibernate, which is an ORM framework, and Hibernate implements the JPA specification. And it means is to convert the object into database tables, map the Java class variables to columns, Java class to database, and Java class object values to the row in the database. So this job we will give it to Spring Data JPA. So let's see how we can implement this. So first thing, we have to go to our package and create another package called entity. So what is an entity? Entity is that class which will get mapped to a database table. So why can't we use this DTO then? We can use this DTO. No, we won't be using the DTO, but we will need the exact same fields that we have in the DTO in our entity as well. The reason we won't use the DTO is basically responsible for holding the data in this layer, in the controller layer and in the service layer. But we want to have another type of class which will be holding the data in the repository layer, and that class is called not called DTO but entity. And entities are actual objects which the ORM maps to database. So we will see it now in action. Then I think things will be more clear. So copy the exact same fields of the entity of the DTO, and let's create the entity class called property entity. Hit enter and let's paste them here. We need to paste all the things that we copy from here. So copy the whole thing, paste it here. Remember that we also discussed every table has its own primary key column. This is this one, this primary key column. So in the entity, we have to also keep another column as ID. That will become the primary key column. Hence, we will declare private long ID, and this ID will act as a primary key column for our table. But how do Hibernate know whether I have to convert this class into a database table? Hibernate doesn't know. We have to tell Hibernate. And we tell Hibernate with the help of two annotation. One is @entity. So if you see, this annotation comes from JavaX persistence entity, which is nothing but Java persistence API JPA provided by Java. Then another is @table, and in the table we can say the name. If we don't specify any name here in the table, then it is going to create a table with this name. But what I want to have a proper name. So I will say property underscore table, property table. That's the name I'm giving. So it will create a table with the name property and underscore table. Similarly, what I want is I want to have various fields associated with this. So I want to make this as a primary key column. So in order to make something as a primary key column, we have to tell the JPA that this is the annotation, ID annotation. ID is the annotation with which we can tell JPA that make this column as a primary key column. So in our case, we are going to make this ID as a primary key column. So for that, we will use the annotation this. So now this column will be treated as the primary key column. And remember, we don't want to generate, we don't want to insert the value of the primary key column manually. We will give the values for this fields, but not for this. We want the primary key column data to be generated automatically. So for that, we have to use, again, take help of annotations coming from JPA, that is generated value. And here we will say what is the strategy of generating the value. So what we are saying is please generate automatic values for this ID column, which is of long type. So now we want to say what is the strategy that you should use to generate random values. So we will say generation type dot auto. Using this strategy means whatever is the default generation type used in this particular database. For example, in H2 database, it will use that strategy to generate the ID. Basically, it's going to create a database sequence. Okay. Now, if I want a separate name for this particular column with some restrictions in it, I can do all those things. Like, let's say if I want this title to be with a name, different name than title. So I can use column, and here I can say name is equal to, I can say property underscore title. So now it's going to create a column not with the name of title but with the name of property underscore title. But for this one, if we don't give @ column here above this, then it will create with this name. For this also it will create with this name. Can I give more things? Yes, I can say should this column be null? No, so nullable false. Any other constraints I can add? I can say length of the data in this column should be this much. It should be unique. So those kind of constraints I can keep on adding, and I can do the same with other fields as well. Like I can say owner email as well, anything. So I can say email nullable false. So I can give it here as much as I want. If I don't use for this, then it will be with this names, it will be created with default conditions. Next is either we have to generate a getter setters for this because they are private, or we take help of the Lombok. So we'll say getter @setter, and we also need a no argument constructor. So we'll use @no argument constructor. That's it. So now we have created our entity class. So in the next video, we will go and work upon our repository layer. So thank you. I will see you in the next video.